Folks, what is going on? The long-awaited return of Bullet Points. We've missed you over the summer. I've missed you guys over the last few years. We have to update our intro, but it's still a classic here. I'm joined by Rob and Maniac. And boy, do we have some exciting UB football stuff to talk about today. First off, the Bulls coming off a 30-13 win over Lafayette to improve to 1-0. I come back to Bullet Points, and then they suddenly start defeating FCS schools again, which is a nice thing. But guys, how are you guys doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Obviously, you just said coming off a big win that should be expected year after year, but obviously, as you mentioned, the last few years have not gone that way. But we're feeling good, and obviously a very tough matchup this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, changing the complexion of a college program, which Pete Lembo's trying to do, right? It's like eating an elephant. So you can only do it one bite at a time. But I think a competent season opener against an FCS squad where you play a relatively clean game, that's a great start and a great first bite.
Yeah, so we're going to get right into it against Lafayette. We're going to spend a few minutes on Lafayette, then go into Missouri. What were your overall impressions from that contest? I thought UB looked really solid against a ranked team in the FCS level. They had an All-American running back who could not get any room on the ground. I thought the Bulls' passing game was better than expected, especially with all the talk about Agbana being just a runner. The receiving core, Nick McMillan looks to be the real deal. The running backs, Barksdale, Henderson, they both had some solid performances. My main takeaway coming away from week one is that this UB team might be a little bit better than what fans thought heading into the season.
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise was Agbana. I mean, obviously, we knew he was the runner. We saw him multiple times last year coming in for I'm blanking on his name, whatever.
Eastern Snyder. My poor guy,
Cole Snyder, obviously.
Cole Snyder, I just want to go on the record, can drop dimes. If he's in the right offense, I think that we saw it, but it was never the case.
Starting at EMU.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll find out probably. But Rob, go ahead.
But yeah, I think he was impressive. The passing game, it wasn't the greatest, but it wasn't also the worst. I mean, we've seen obviously a lot worse. So I really was impressed with the passing game. The running game, it shows that we have a lot of depth. I think I want to say that we had all four of them play a quarter over the weekend. So it's good to get them some playing time. And then the defense, obviously, a lot of returning guys, and they showed that they're a lot of returning guys, and hopefully that can continue throughout the year.
Maniac, what were your takeaways? I mean, you've been pretty close to this squad so far throughout the summer. You've been going to the weekly press conferences. What are your thoughts early in the season about the squad, from anything from Pete Lembo to players that you've talked to?
The two or three takeaways I got are, first off, you have the preseason and the buildup. Just a lot of confidence in this locker room, given, the state of the program. You might think, are these, a lot of these players are playing on a 4-8 team a year ago that lost its coach. Is that going to lead to a shaky group? No, there's a lot of confidence. There's a lot of excitement, I think, especially with the new regime. And I think that's, a credit to Lembo that he I think you've talked about it, like doing the little things right and understanding like what he has to do kind of in this role. He even talked about the game day atmosphere at his press conference this week. He was talking about, we have to do the little things to make sure we keep the fans there, to make sure we keep the fans engaged. So love to hear that. Then you have the execution on the field. I liked most of the game. Again, are there going to be a couple mistakes, especially week one? I think that's a given in any football program, any football matchup. But I think they did a good job of limiting them and obviously forcing Lafayette for more. And a reason, one of Lafayette's biggest mistakes was an interception. And this goes to the most punctuating point for this UB team is the return of Sean Dolak. I think after the injury, it's easy to say right now. Yeah, of course, he led the, nation in tackles in 2022. He's going to be great in 2024. No, I mean, a significant injury, a lot of rehab, a lot of get back to where he was before that injury. And I think he came out on the other side perhaps better than ever. I was talking with Paul Peck at the press conference, and even he was a little shocked despite seeing him all summer and into this fall camp at what Dolak was able to do week one. So hopefully Dolak shows out in week two, because that offense is definitely going to need to be on point against Mizzou.
And Dolak he's the story of the season so far early on to me, like transferring to Utah State, deciding to come back home, Lembo energizing the program. Everybody's been talking about Joe Andreessen on the Bills and about how impressive he's looked, and how do we overlook this guy in our own backyard? And then you get Sean Dolak, that honestly is just as incredible of a story. Played at West Seneca East, was a walk-on at UB as a sophomore, second in the nation in tackles, first in solo tackles, 13 and a half tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. Like, this guy is a beast. I keep telling people, Dolak is going to be on an NFL training camp roster next year. The biggest question for him on if he has a chance of making a team is how is he going to test at his pro day next year. But this is a guy where his numbers blow away what Joe Andreessen did at UB. And if I can hype him up, I'm going to do everything I can to get people in Buffalo to start paying attention to him, because, well, he might not have the Khalil Mack or Malcolm Kuntz upside of someone that can be a day 1, day 2 pick. Dolak, realistically, is probably one of the best defensive players to ever come through this university.
Yeah, listen, I don't mean to leapfrog Rob here, but I got to do it. I tweeted out, I'm so sick of the lack of recognition of national superstars that we have at UB. We're just coming off a top 10 win in soccer. You got Chella Watson, who after the eras of Sierra Dillard and CJ Fair is a top 5 scorer in NCAA. And now you got Sean Dolak, obviously returning to potentially are we talking all-American form if we could build off what he established in 2022? Because obviously coming on the board in 2022, nobody had the perception, nobody knew about him that year. But when you're returning as a tackle leader from 2 years before, you come back from injury and you start putting up numbers like this. Rob, I feel like we got to be looking at big-time national acclaim if he can continue to put stuff up, especially with the national stage this weekend at Mizzou.
Oh, for sure. If he continues the way he goes, if he's if he's number 2 in tackles and number 1 in solo tackles, he should be an All-American. And I'm predicting it here. He will be a day 3 pick come next April. So starting here, he's a day 3 pick at least.
I'm gonna cool the Jets a little bit on the All-American talk, but definitely a possibility if he puts up numbers like he did 2 years ago. He's definitely a player you're looking at as a possible MAC Defensive Player of the Year, first team All-MAC, a guy that we're talking about as a potential draft pick, depending on his measurables and testing once he gets to that offseason period. But he's not the only player on this UB team that I'm really excited for. UB already has another All-American on this team, and he's also a train wreck NIL athlete. That's Marcus Fuqua, third team All-American 2 years ago when he had 7 interceptions. He had a sharp debut. Red Murdoch, Dolak's linebacker mate, that guy can lay the absolute boom. And then Kobe Stewart had 2 sacks in the opener against Lafayette. So this is a UB defense that can really play. Last year, they struggled at times, but they had no help from their offense. If they can get help from their offense, I think people are going to realize, damn, there's some good defensive players on this UB defense.
And like you said, they weren't bad last year, but they had no offense. And a lot of that, obviously we're talking about the defense, but a lot of that's come from the play calling. I really liked, obviously it's a little different topic, but I think it plays into the whole defense going to be better. If we get better play calling offense, which we did last week, I believe, the defense should stay up, and who knows where the season go. Obviously no one's expecting a MAC championship experience, but some people weren't even expecting a bowl game. So if they could play like how they did, I think they can tail out some 6 wins. But it all starts with the defense, because the offense is still behind the defense, so no matter what will happen.
And Zach, tossing it to you. You have always been close to the coaches at UB. I think we all feel a little bit duped by Maurice Linguist and everything that went down. We were all excited when he was hired. You were especially close to Lance Leipold. I was a big fan of Leipold, and I think you and I appreciated what he did for the program a lot more than maybe some other UB fans at the time. And now we're seeing what he's doing at Kansas, and it's obvious how good of a coach he really is. Maurice Linguist, it was all hype. It was all sales pitch, no authenticity to it. But and you've seen it up close with Pete Lembo right now, there is just a completely different vibe. The players are excited to be there. They seem optimistic about what they're building. They know that they're coming off a 3-9 season, that across the league that there's not high expectations for them, but they're out to prove people wrong. And honestly, the way that they've come together, I think it's possible. Give me your first impressions of Pete Lembo taking over this program.
Yeah, and all respect to Coach Mo, he was always great to work with. But you kind of hit the nail on the head. It was like when he would give you answers, they were almost like politicized. You know what I mean? Like they were just very broad statements talking about the opponent or the preparation, things like that. When you're talking with Lembo, just from my limited experience here, I've probably talked to them, interacted with them 4 to 6 times at this point. Just feels like you're talking to your uncle who's in a recliner, like talking about like football. It's just a lot more comfortable. It's a lot more like fluid, is what I would say. The conversation and what he knows, he's like the 2 press conferences so far in his tenure. The week 0 and then the week 1 prep, obviously. Now for Missouri, or sorry, week 2 prep for Missouri. They've both been kind of like Jonah Bronstein called them textbook dumps, where, Pete kind of just tells you everything that he had on notes from Lafayette. And then he tells you everything that he has on notes in Mizzou, and he mixes in his own like anecdotes. And it's really been an unbelievable experience. I mean, the pressers for Lembo, like linguists would talk for 30 seconds. And this week for Lembo, he talked for about 10 minutes. And then the rest of the presser was about 8 to 10 minutes because he answered so much in that time with talking. So it's really just so much like it seems like the process seems to be a lot more understood within the locker room as well. Then that breeds confidence. Just everyone knows what they're doing. Everyone knows what they're trying to execute. It's not a bunch of guys working on their own individual game. It's a team working together. So yeah, I think that Vegas may be sleeping on this UB squad at the end of the day for sure. I think they could be a thorn in the side of the MAC picture. Am I saying, buckle up for Detroit? Of course not yet. And I wouldn't even say that at 1-0 or 2-0 in MAC play, because I think we saw some linguist starts at 1-0 or 2-0 in MAC play. But with that said, I'm excited. I'm excited what I saw. And the other report I got, we hung out with Marcus last night at Sports City Pizza Pub. Seems like on the defensive side of the ball, everyone is in pretty good shape after the Lafayette game. Nobody banged up or anything there. And I did see, I don't want to spoil anything. So that's all I'll say. I saw Marcus looking at film, and I saw 2 specific things that UB's trying to execute on the defensive side of the ball. And those things make me excited for the Mizzou matchup.
Ooh, that's something to watch out for. We'll see if there's anything up their sleeves against Missouri. But one more thing about Lembo before we go to the Mizzou preview, and this is something that should excite a lot of UB fans. There was a lot of fear when he took over from some parts of the fan base that, okay, you're getting a retread. This guy was at Ball State. He was at Lehigh, Elon. How is it going to work out in the MAC? But one thing that he has said to me while talking is that he is very invested in being a pass-first head coach. He wants UB to have a very solid passing game, which is something that the Bulls honestly have not had the majority of their history outside of maybe the Tyree Jackson years, a little bit with Licata and then Drew Willie. You look in recent years, it's been the run game that has basically gotten the job done and either driven their success or led to their failure. Rob, you hear about Lembo and being a pass-heavy coach. Obviously, right now, maybe not the number one choice for quarterback for that type of offense, but how does that make you feel going forward, that it does feel like the Bulls have a coach that realizes we are in the 21st century and that you need to throw the ball around a little bit to win games?
I mean, all you can say is excitement. I mean, like you said, a lot in the past, obviously, without a few exceptions, we've been run first for almost our whole existence. So when you're watching some of these college games all throughout the years, you see all these electric QBs chucking the ball down the field. And here at UB, we don't see that much. It's a lot of big runs, maybe some big run after catches, but the excitement of football and a lot of sports are the big plays, and the big plays come from passing. And when you have fun and you have excitement on the field, that's when you bring the fans in. Everything falls when you have excitement in a college football game, and it all starts with the passing game. So
let's talk Missouri right now. First off, Rob, you know how I went to Ohio, and that's kind of a sore subject for everyone here when it comes to bullet points. But What you don't know is that Missouri was actually my number 2 school. I almost ended up at Mizzou. I visited, was originally my top school, but then I decided I don't want to drive 13 hours every time I go there. So I did visit, but never ended up deciding to go there. Now, the line for this game is 34.5. We're going to talk about the line first, and then we can talk about some of their players to look out for. Is that line crazy? Do you think it's fair? What are your thoughts about the line being 34.5 points?
Yeah, I think this UB team is still very unknown. Obviously, Mizzou is, what are they up to? Number 9, I think.
Number 9 in the coach
Yeah.
is number 10 in AP, I believe.
Okay, so I mean, they're obviously you're gonna get a big disadvantage there. An unknown UB team with a top 10 school. I do think that is a little high for what we saw last week. Obviously, the opponents, it's FCS versus FBS, but I do think I don't think it would be close to the game, but I do think it could fall a little under that. So if I was gonna bet this game, I think I would go with the plus 34 you said 31
34.5 right now.
Yeah, so I would probably go with the Bulls plus 34.5. It won't be close, but I don't think it will be that bad.
I'm with you on that. I don't have an official score prediction, but when I was thinking about it in my head, I'm leaning 42-13 or something like that. I don't want to say that's my final prediction. I think it's going to be probably in the 20s. What I want to see is the same thing I want to see whenever a MAC school plays a Big 12 or an SEC or an ACC school. I just want to see them show moments where a flash. I want to see them be competitive at moments. It's really hard to expect any non-major school to go on the road to a top 10 program and be competitive. Most schools are going to lose pretty badly in those instances. And I'm not saying I don't have any hope for UB to be competitive at moments, but it is a tall task going on the road to Columbia, Missouri, taking on a top 10 team that finished 8th in the country last year, won the Cotton Bowl, and won their opener 51-0 to say, hey, can you keep it within 21 points? Like it's a pretty tough ask. I think if they do it, it's going to come down to they showed up defensively more so than they kept scoring, because Missouri has a great defense. Their secondary gets involved in the box, making plays at the line of scrimmage. It's going to be tough for UB to facilitate offense on Saturday. But if you are UB, what is your attack in this game? How are you going after Missouri?
Oh man,
Are you slow? Are you trying to run the ball to kill clock, or are you saying, you know what, we know Missouri's going to put up points, we got to throw with them. Let's test our quarterback. Let's see what he can do against the SEC defense. But then you're putting yourself in vulnerable pass blocking situations. It's where, like, I know if players are watching this right now, they're probably not liking what we're saying. But one thing we're trying to do at Bullet Points is balance hyping the team with reality of the situation. There's a reason why the line is 34.5 points. UB coming off a 3-9 season, taking on a team that had 11-2 record last year. So where do we find the balance? What is a successful day for UB?
Yeah, I think you got to go in, like we were just talking about it. I think you got to go in pass first. I think if you go in heavy run, it's kind of showing, obviously you may be scared, but I think it's also showing, hey, let's get in there. Let's get the money that we're getting paid to be here, and let's get out. I think you got to go pass first. I think Lembo's got to try to make an impression. What does he have to lose? If he loses, he loses. But if he wins, wow, that's a career altering program change right there in week 2 of his first year. So I think you got to go pass first and leave everything on that field.
And you know what? Honestly, I'm kind of with you on that. Let's see what Agbana can do in a very difficult atmosphere, tough situation going up against SEC defense. Because you know what? I think this run game will be solid in MAC play. I think they'll get the yardage, but they're going to be at a huge disadvantage in the trenches going up against Mizzou. Now, if they can run the ball early, well, maybe you stick with it a little bit because you can kill clock and maybe you can keep it closer for a longer period of time. But I want to see what Nick McMillan can do against Missouri. I think McMillan is the top offensive player on this team in the skill positions as far as UB. I like the running backs at UB, but I don't think the running backs are the strength of this team. I think McMillan is the top offensive player. I think Agbana's mobility is a strength. Even if he can't get passes, even if he's not the most accurate passer, I think his legs are always going to be a threat to run the ball and get first downs that way, especially if Missouri's putting pressure on you. So I guess let's test it out a little bit. If it's a disaster early, maybe then you head to the more of a run-based offense. But I want to see what these guys can do. And just talking about Missouri, quick, I just want to bring up a few stats and metrics about them. As we said, 9th in the AP poll, 10th in the coaches poll. Their coach, Dinkwitz, was 11-2 last year, won the Cotton Bowl over Ohio State. He's 29-21 in his career, 17-17 in the SEC. Had 1 year at App State. Their starting quarterback, Brady Cook, 20 touchdown passes last year. Solid guy. 2 transfer running backs, Nate Noel from App State, and then Marcus Carroll, transfer running back from Georgia State. They returned their top 3 receivers from last season. Luther Burden III, he's a guy to look out for on Missouri, a potential top 10 pick. He had 86 receptions for 12 yards last year, 9 touchdowns. Theo Weiss Jr. also comes back, 49 catches for 682 and 6 touchdowns. And Mookie Cooper, 36 for 447. They've lost a few guys, most notably Darius Robinson, who was drafted 27th overall by the Cardinals, who led the team with 8.5 sacks last year. They also lost Chris Abrams-Drain, who led the team with 4 interceptions last year. But overall, this is a good Missouri team. This is a team that is expected to compete for one of the final college football playoff spots this season. What are you thinking about this Missouri team? Not from a UB standpoint, but when you watch this Missouri team, you see them, you've seen the highlights, you've seen them on TV in recent years. What stands out to you about this team?
I mean, they're very well-rounded. You were mentioning that offense. Obviously, they have that possible top 10 pick in Luther Burden. And when you have a guy like him, you see any of these top guys that are going in wide receivers, especially in these drafts, to get drafted as a wide receiver that early and be projected that early, you got to ball out in college, and that guy balls out, and he's an exciting watch. And then obviously a defense, I believe they returned a lot of guys as well. So it's a very experienced group outside of few position rooms on that team. So it's definitely a team to watch. And I do think this, with especially being in the SEC, you can afford a couple losses in the SEC, but I think this is a team that could find one of those final spots when it come January or December.
Yeah. And the final thing I want to talk about Missouri, and before we kind of wrap up, give our final thoughts and predictions. Obviously, no maniac. He was going to pick a UB win anyway, so it doesn't make a difference that he's not here. But what are your opinions on these bye games? Obviously, you go into the season, you pencil it in as a loss. But do you like these for UB from the financial perspective of this helps fund your football program? Or do you hate it as a fan knowing that realistically, as ESPN's Football Power Index puts it, you have less than a 3% chance of winning this game?
Yeah, I think it goes both ways. I think it's good for like you saying, it's good for the school, good for the program. This is how you some of these, especially the smaller schools, that's how you make money. They have to go to these big schools. On the other hand, it's exciting to be able to watch some of these top schools go at it and stuff. And it's good experience for the team itself to play someone like that. But overall, I like it a lot more in basketball because I think they mean a little more in basketball. Because for football, these schools, they're not going here, oh my God, let's get this big win so we get an at-large bid. There's nothing like that. They're going to get that money. They could have easily played an FCS school. So I think that I would be okay with them not having to do the bye games in football, but it does have some good pros, like I was mentioning there.
All financial motivated.
Yeah.
And the thing with UB that kind of sucks is you go back 20 years. When has UB ever won one of these big ones? I can't even recall really any significant. They beat Rutgers, I believe, once. I don't even know if that was a road game. I think it was.
That was a road game. Yeah.
Was it a road game? Okay, so I mean, I can bring up a few with the Bobcats. Ohio beat Penn State one year, and they defeated Iowa State last year. But those are really rare games and really tough. And the Iowa State game was actually at Peden, which was even weirder. But one thing I do want to say is it's one of those things. UB needs it to obviously fund things, but it does suck. Like as a fan, like the only real positive besides the money is the pretend feeling that you tell yourself that you're relevant because you're playing a school that's in the top 10, when in reality, no one looks at it that way because they played Murray State the week before. No one thinks that Murray State is now relevant at football because they played Missouri. So it's just kind of like trying to convince yourself why the game actually is exciting, and when in all reality, it's not. But one thing I will say, UB did play Missouri back in the day on the road when they had Chase Daniel and played them close for about 2.5, 3 quarters before eventually getting routed. But it was a game where they put some scare into the Tiger fan base for a little bit. And looking beyond this game, you have UMass and UConn before opening MAC play. Realistically, if UB is going to have a good season where they're going to get to 6+ wins and get to a bowl game, what do they have to do these next 30 weeks?
I think they got to go into MAC play 3-1. Obviously 2-2 is great. 2 wins going to MAC play is awesome, but obviously this week I'm chalking a loss. You should be able to beat UMass. And then UConn, they're not anything great in football. Obviously you hear UConn and you're like, wow, basketball back to back, but it's the total opposite when you get out on that football field. They are not a very good football team. So I think the Bulls should be able to go 3-1 going to MAC play.
All right. Well, we already know where both of us are going with this prediction, but let's give our official predictions for UB at number 9, Missouri. Rob, you get it started. We know where you're going with the win and the loss, but what's the final score going to be?
Yeah, so I think it, just like we've seen in some of these big games the past few years, I think they keep it close in the first half. We saw it at Wisconsin. We saw it at Penn State. So I think it's like, wow, they're going to keep it close. And then the skill level of the two teams will start playing a factor second half. And I think I'm going to go with a final score of 38 to 13.
Okay.
Missouri.
That's not awful. Honestly, 25 points. I think a lot of Bulls fans would honestly accept that against a top 10 team on the road. I'm a little bit higher for Missouri. I'm going to go Mizzou 42-13. I will say I would go UB with the plus 34.5. I think that line is trying to bait people after Missouri won by 51 points. They're playing another opponent that nationally doesn't really have much perception. And I think they want to kind of bait bettors into going with the over because you're expecting that. But this UB defense, I think, has the ability to get enough stops. I think they're going to be able to kill enough clock at times to keep it reasonably close. I'm hoping keep it within 10, 14 points in the first half. And then if Missouri is just too good to keep with them in the second half, that's how it is. But Rob, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, just glad to be back with bullet points here, and let's hopefully have a good showing on Saturday.
Yep, I'm hoping for the same. And guys, for anyone watching this right now, we're going to try to have bullet points every single week going forward during football season, whether that be me, Rob, Maniac. We're going to try to do more of these shows. We know that we've been slacking in during basketball season. It was tough last year. Football team went 3-9. The basketball team won 4 games. When you have 7 wins between the men's basketball and the football team, there's just not much of a point to have shows, especially with the fan base really not engaging much last year. And I get it. It's tough for you guys. It's tough for us. We're hoping that we can create some positive energy, that this program can really start to re-energize the UB fan base. I like what the Pete Lembo hire has done for the football team. I think Becky Burke is creating a good culture for the women's basketball team. Soccer just had a huge win over number 7 Pitt. They were ranked top 25 in the country a week ago. Men's basketball, I still have some hope for George Halkovich III. I'm hoping they can take a step forward this year. But like I said, we're trying to re-up this. We're trying to get right back into this and build some more momentum for UB Athletics. So appreciate you, Rob, and then also Maniac joining me for this great half an hour of Bulls Talk. And we will see you guys next week.